Great. So, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to a new edition of our EuroWeb Book Corner. This is the 7th edition, but as I was saying before, this is the first time that we have a book on textile dyes, which is such a huge part of our network. So there are many dye experts in our network, and so I'm very happy about that. We are all very happy about it, and we are very happy and very honored to have with us today Dr. Dominique Cardon, who is going to present her new book, hers and Iris Brémaud's new book, Paul Gout's 157 Colors. I'm going to briefly present them, although I'm pretty sure they don't need any presentation, but still, just for protocol, I will introduce both of them, and then I will give them, as is usual in these book corners, I will give the floor to Dominique, who will present her new book. And in the end, we will have a little Q&A. So if you have any questions, any comments on the book that you want to make, you will have the opportunity to do it. I would also like to greet any other colleagues or any other people that may be watching us on the YouTube channel of our action, the EuroWeb YouTube channel. Welcome. Maybe you are watching live, maybe you will be watching later, because as we were also talking before, there may be people from all over the world interested, but that due to time zones cannot be with us today live. So hopefully the video will also reach a wider audience, which will be great. So just to say some quick words about the authors of the book and our speaker today. Dr. Dominique Cardon is the Emerita Director de Recherche at the CNRS, the French National Center of Scientific Research. And in her career, she has been attached to the same research unit, the Histoire, Archéologie, Littérature des mondes chrétiens, musulmans, médiévaux in Lyon since 1991. I think that most of the people in our audience will know this, but her research teams throughout her career have been the history and archaeology of textile production, and especially of dyeing with natural colorants. She is the author of reference books and articles, of which I think perhaps the one most people immediately think of is the 2007 magistral book on natural dyes. But she has also developed research that has as a basic thread the parallel discovery of dye sources and related dyeing techniques among different civilizations since prehistorical times. This is something that she's still pursuing. She's still studying the dyes of archaeological textiles, both from sites and places as different as Egypt and China. And she has also had an important work as a mentor and a supervisor. She has supervised several master and PhD theses on both traditional and newly identified dye sources of many countries with rich endemic flora, such as New Caledonia, Madagascar, and the island of La Réunion. She is currently in the process of publishing a series of ancient dyers' books with dyed textile samples, such as the one that we are going to hear about today. And she does this work because she considers that they provide a very unique combination of information which can inspire also present actors of the revival of natural colorants, which is something that we also value very much in EuroWeb, this retrieval of traditional dyes and textiles and fibers. And this, of course, makes a very important contribution in ensuring a more sustainable and ethical approach to fashion and to textile production. She has acted as the scientific director of successive international symposiums on natural colorants in India, South Korea, France, Madagascar, and China. And she has also been highly commended for her work. She has received the silver medal of the CNRS in 2011, the UNESCO medal Thinking and Building Peace in 2006, and she was made Chevalier de la Légion d'honneur in France in 2015, and Chevalier de l'Ordre des Arts, des Lettres et de la Culture of Madagascar in 2017. So that is our speaker for today, but I would also like to, with her permission, to say some words on her co-author, Iris Brémaud. She's also a permanent research fellow of the CNRS, currently working in the Wood team of the Mechanical and Civil Engineering Laboratory, which is a joint research unit between the CNRS and the University of Montpellier. And she's a researcher in wood science. She studies how all over the world 3 species produce woods with remarkable physical properties that make them precious for a wide range of crafts uses. The research of Dominique and Iris meets around the topic of dyewood trees. Several of them are mentioned in Paul Gout's dye recipes that we are going to hear about today. And the colorants of these dyewood trees are not only great sources of dyes, but they are also the key to some important characters that make the woods of such trees indispensable for the making of some parts of various musical instruments, for example. They have, I think, another work in common, the Couleurs d'autrefois pour verdir notre monde, in which they share their passion for colors, their love of plants, and their admiration for the knowledge of dyers from the past. And she has been responsible for the color measurements of the textile samples published in this book, and for the discussion of the data with Dominique. So I think I've spoken quite enough. Just to introduce both of our speakers, and now I will give the floor to Dominique, who will talk about her wonderful book. Thank you so much for joining us today and for giving us this presentation.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon, everybody. I'm very grateful to Paula Nabais and to the organizers of the EuroWeb Book Corner for their invitation today to share thoughts with you about our recent book, Paul Gout's 157 Colors. Iris Brémaud, the co-author of the book, cannot be with us today, but sends her warm regards. And this presentation will make an important contribution to the book quite clear. So before I tell you who Paul Gout was and what his 157 colors are and how they can concern you, I must stress that in our mind, this new book fits into a series of books, which I shall describe in a moment, and that these books are concerned as a contribution, are conceived, as a contribution to the unfathomably long history of the art of dyeing, with colorants offered by nature, as revealed by an accumulation of archaeological discoveries. So, how do we know with what colorants these ancient colors were obtained? This is thanks to the huge advances made in the techniques of dye analysis in the last 40 years. They now allow us to better understand the amazing sum of empirical knowledge that allowed, or research rather, empirical research that allowed prehistoric humans all over the world to select some dye plants and animals for the beauty and quality of their coloring components. But how do we know? How can we know how they managed to obtain these magnificent colors? And for this, it's a comfort to see that the texts about dyeing appear very early in history, and they become quite precise all over the centuries. But for these early periods, we lack connections between the recipes and the results obtained in terms of colors. And an additional problem in this type of research is that is the brutal break in the transmission of knowledge caused by the discovery and complete triumph of synthetic colorants, which led to the discontinuation of any scientific and technological research and a total lack of financial investment into natural dyes and dyeing. So, now, not only as an historian and archaeologist specialized in textile techniques and in dyeing techniques, but simply as a human being and a citizen, I am very much concerned about the environmental challenges of our time. And I believe natural dyes should be an integral part of the indispensable evolution towards more environmentally friendly, sustainable and ethical modes of textile production and a new approach to fashion design. And this is why some years ago, I started publishing scholarly editions of documents I considered particularly precious as sources of dyeing techniques, and which I thought could provide useful foundations to start working towards a reintroduction of natural dyes in our everyday textile environment. But then I realized that the language, the technical terms, the ancient units of measurements in these historical documents made their access and the practical use of their information too cumbersome for some readers. And I decided to now publish specially designed tools, that is a series of practical cahier workbooks in French and English, which would focus on giving the basic elements to both understand the context of the dyer's work and experiment at working on their processes. And so this is a typical file for each color samples in each of the cahier or workbooks, using the extraordinary combination of the presence of the color name, the corresponding dyed sample, which can be measured, and so we can get precise chromatic data for it. And I also made the effort to translate all these ancient measurements into modern and metric measurements, and from them to work on giving much more simply, proportions based on the dry weight of textiles, in this case it's wool, to be dyed. This series of workbooks are published in the chronological orders of the sources, so that will progressively lead the readers through the evolution of dye sources and dyeing techniques until the period when both natural and synthetic colorants coexist in some dyers' books with samples, and before the natural colorants completely disappear around the turn of the 20th century. And as an introduction, in each workbook, I give some basic data about the context and the dyer's biography. And in the case of the two first published workbooks, the two writers actually knew each other because they worked in very close places. Saint-Chinian and Bise are about 17 kilometers apart. And Antoine Janot, the author I used for the first workbook, was the only dyer, or sometimes one of the two dyers, for the independent clothiers who were working in Saint-Chinian, and who were part of the Guild of Clothiers there. And besides this Guild of Clothiers, there were two royal manufacturers in Saint-Chinian, Lézère and Saint-Agnan, and where Paul Gout actually started working in Lézère when he was young, and later on he moved to Bise. So they were not only, they knew each other, but they were actually next door neighbors. Since you can, I don't know if you can see my arrow, my pointer. Yeah. Antoine Janot, as I said, was the main dyer of the town, depending on what period. And Paul Gout came to Saint-Chinian originally in 1747 as the head of the director of the manufacture of Lézère. And in that respect, he was Antoine Janot's next door neighbor. Here is the manufacturer, and this is Antoine Janot's house, and dye works were behind. And so they were rinsing their pieces of cloth in the same canal or in the river, and they were drying them in the fields just behind the row of buildings there. And it's also in Saint-Chinian that Paul Gout met, fell in love with, and married the daughter of the director of the other royal manufacturer of the town, Saint-Agnan. Soon they moved in 1757, actually, they moved to Bise. You have the building of the royal manufacturer there by the river Cesse. And there they had access, the royal manufacturer also had access to several springs which were above the river from the manufacturer. And Paul Gout was so successful in this manufacture of bees that he soon became wealthy enough to buy half of the shares of the royal manufacturer. So he became also the co-owner, besides being director, technical manager, he became co-owner, and eventually even ended his life as a co-seigneur, which is a co-squire of the town. So that was a success story, actually. Both the directors of royal manufacturers and the dyers and all clothiers were perfectly aware of the amazing importance of the quality and beauty of dyes in the success of this type of cloths, which were designed to be exported to the huge markets of the Ottoman Empire. And a wealth of other sources stress the importance of colors, which stems from the very refined color tastes and the requirements of the customers in the different parts of the Ottoman Empire. And there's a kind of very quick change in color fashions, and it's like the present fashions in Europe, you know, where you have to present different collections every now and then, every season. And so the success of the dyes, of the Languedocian dyers, ended up in helping a huge output of cloth. You had this constant circulation of cloth from Languedoc to the Levant through the harbor of Marseille. And the magnitude of the production is comparable to the industrial scales of the 19th century, or they are somewhat superior of what we have now in the European textile industry, which has been so much, and unfortunately, delocalized. So you can see the figures, you know, 6,000 was a kind of medium level of production for the whole century, and this amounts to an enormous number of meters of cloth pieces. To talk precisely of Saint-Chinian and Bise, you can see here the level of production of the clothiers of Saint-Chinian. Of course, they were much more numerous than the two royal manufacturers, and that explains the size of the production. And we must think that Antoine Janot, we are sure that he was the only dyer at some stages, and at most I've been able to find two other dyers in some periods. And in the case of Paul Gout, he was not only the director of the manufacture, you have here is the output of the manufacturer in orange, but he was also the supervisor of the dye works. He had he was in charge of deciding what was going to be dyed in what numbers, and to manage the circulation of clothes in his manufacture every day. So you can see that this amounted to, even from only the point of view of dyeing, to quite a serious work at managing and ordering goods and so on and so forth. Now, about the ways workbooks are organized. After this general introduction, I decided to follow the same structure as the original manuscript itself. And all dyers in Europe at the time were classifying colors and explaining their techniques according to the classification of primary colors they had, which was blue, red, yellow, fawn, and black. And the techniques of dyeing are associated with this classification. So in the case of Gout's workbook, it starts with blue, and each section of the workbook is illustrated by an original painting by Jacques Jousson, which shows one of the main dye plants used in that section of the book. So in this case, it's wood and indigo vat. So this section starts with an explanation of the scientific and technical rationale of the wood and indigo vat, which was the way all dyers were obtaining their blues. And so couch wood, which is a double fermentation of the crushed leaves of wood, served in two ways. It was the main source of it was the main reducing agent because it induced fermentation, a bacterial fermentation, which helped to reduce the indigo content of the couch wood. But the couch wood at that stage amounted to a comparatively smaller proportion, smaller contribution to the coloring property of the vat than indigo, which was imported at that stage from the French Indies, which had developed a huge production of indigo, connected, unfortunately, with slave trade. So it's also a very tragic history. But the addition of indigo pigment contributed to of course, to the coloring power of the vat. And in that schema, I try to figure and illustrate with photos because now it's a reality. People are reproducing this vat, and about 10 years ago, maybe I couldn't have said that, but we are also progressing in terms of reconstituting processes. I am also discussing in that section the size of the vat, thanks to archaeological discoveries in Nîmes, with an idea of the magnitude of at which these processes were performed. These vats, which were found in Nîmes, they hold about 4,500 liters of this wood and indigo vat. So you can imagine that that would help to process these very big cloth pieces. So this is, I think, an encouragement for people now to upscale their production, and also a way to get industrial people in the textile industry interested in natural dyes. They take us more seriously, knowing that it was done at such scale and on a routine way, and that it worked, and the result was not only beautiful, as you can see here, but also quite fast. So after this scientific or technical introduction, I just follow the order of the samples. For the blue section, we cannot give a very precise process. That is this section. We can give a very precise chromatic data, but we can't say how you are going to obtain a blue pair rather than this lighter blue. It has to be found by each dyer, and for each dye vat process used by trial and error, but basically the first dips and repeated dips give very dark, the darkest blue. And one of the difficulties was to get light blue, so dyers tended to wait until the end of the vat, when the vat was becoming nearly exhausted, to more securely obtain light blues. The difficulty was to get a perfectly even blue all along the piece, which is quite a technical achievement. So after the blues come all the modern dyes, which they used to call boiling baths, because of course the first step was boiling the pieces into boiling solutions of mostly alum and tartar. And the section starts with reds, and something which is noticeable in this section is that the painting by Jackie, this painting of dyer's madder, was made with madder pigment he prepared himself. So the red is really madder red. The two sources of reds in Gout's book are madder, dyer's madder, and cochineal. And this section starts with an explanation of the very clever and very thorough way Gout manages to recycle his modern baths and his dye baths to obtain a succession of less and less saturated reds, which allow to maximize the coloring power of the most costly of his ingredients, which was cochineal. The next section is the section on yellows, and one characteristic of this workbook by Paul Gout is that he makes uses of local resources. So we here have dye plants which don't appear in other people's dye books, like this flax-leaved Daphne, which is a plant which is very, very common in the garrigue of Languedoc. So he could send people to get cartloads or barrow loads of the plant. And as a result, we have this succession of recipes where you can use either weld or a mixture of weld and flaxseed Daphne, or only flaxseed Daphne. And the section of weld on yellows also includes the greens, which are obtained on with the same yellow dye bath, but on grounds of various shades of blues. So it's a very important section because Paul Gout developed a kind of special expertise on greens. And that is because most of his customers in the Ottoman Empire were Muslim, and the green is one of the favorite colors of the Prophet Mahomet and also of Muslim customers. The next section is on phones. And again, Paul Gout is quite original because he gives lots of recipes based on the use of a local tannin plant, redoule, Coriaria myrtifolia, which was also very much used by local tanners, and which unfortunately has a very toxic fruit, but he was using only the leaves and stems. And this section on phones, together with redoule and goldnut and some additions of dye woods, is very, very rich in different shades. You have hazelnut shades, coffee shades, tobacco shades, plum. It's an amazing variety of brownish, purplish, grayish, nuances, which of course were very much used by for men's clothes. And the last section is black, and it's I put this illustration in front of the black instead of a plant because it's an extraordinary document. It's not a Gout, they are not blacks which are being dyed by Gout, but the recipes were the same for all the Languedocian dyers, and they were based on a very dark ground of blue, Persian blue to Turkish blue. And what you see here is a demonstration of the fastness of these 18th century dyes, because the upper section of the samples, here, are the original dye, and the lower section has been submitted to what Lewis XIV, King Lewis XIV, and Colbert had wanted to be devised, a way to check the quality of dyes before their exportation to other countries. And here you see the result of the same pieces of textiles being boiled for a quarter of an hour in an amazingly concentrated decoction of alum and tartar, which is supposed to completely strip the samples if they have not of their color, if they have not been dyed on a ground of dark blue. And so you can see that the color is hardly changed. It's really a concrete testimony to the fastness of these historical dyes. But black is a kind of achievement in the dyer's craft, but they also reuse the dye bath or use smaller proportions of all the ingredients, so goldnut, Redoule, of course, saddened with copperas, iron 2 sulfate, and with nuances which are obtained mostly with dye woods. And so you have an amazing succession of grays of all shades. And then it leads to the last part of Gout's manuscript and of the workbook too, which is, in my mind, probably the most even the most interesting part, because it's a kind of diary. After a while, after a few pages, one realizes that he's just describing what he has been doing day by day. And in that part, he ventures into trying new recipes, adding some new ingredients, adding more dye woods, adding less well-known sources of alum, which are also less expensive. It's all the aim is cost saving and also managing all the ingredients. And this is extremely interesting. For instance, I have made these two schema diagrams of how he uses the two shades of blue that he has obtained from his wood vat that week to obtain an extraordinary range of purples and of greens, reusing the dye bath, different modern baths, I mean, and reusing his cochineal bath for the case in the case of purples, reusing two weld baths and a bath which is a combination of weld and flaxleaf Daphne. Now we come to the last discussion, which is how we could make the maximum use of something which is very rare, the presence of dyed samples in the manuscript. So it was Iris who performed color measurements of all the 157 samples with this portable spectrophotometer. So a portable spectrophotometer, you send beam of light onto the sample. The light is standardized, the angle of the light is also standardized, and the surface, the superficie, the area which is submitted to this light, and it is translated. These data are translated into data which allow to situate every nuance, every sample color in within this chromatic space, which is a chromatic space proposed in 1976 by the Commission Internationale de l'Éclairage, the International Commission on Illumination, and which proposed to situate every color very precisely and objectively, thanks to these measurements, in this space where you have three coordinates from the axis of grays, from black to white, the axis of the A and B axis from magenta to green, and the last one from blues to yellows. And so you get these values, L, A, B, which can be calculated in a different way, which will give you the C datum, which is colorfulness or chromaticity, and the angle of hue, which allows to situate them among the reds or the yellows or the whites and blues. And what does it, I mean, it may sound a bit artificial or far-fetched, but this way of situating precisely each color, it allows many different, it allows to go much further. It allows comparisons between colors which are preserved in documents which cannot be traveled from one place to another, and it allows pertinent comparison, very precise comparisons. It also allows making use of an accumulation of sources, not only in French archives, but I found some also in English archives, where you have piles of card samples with samples which are dyed textiles, without color names, so you just can't figure out or be sure with what they were dyed. And it also checks the accuracy of attempts at reproducing these colors, either with natural or with synthetic dyes. And at last, and that's what I was really interested in also, was it's a new source of inspiration. So I'll give you examples of all these applications. This way of measuring all the dyed samples, I could do the color measurements of most of the samples preserved in the Crutchley archives. The Crutchley dyers were important dyers in Southwark, borough of London, but at the same time as Antoine Janot. They are a bit earlier, a few, maybe 10 or 20 years earlier than Paul Gout. And but they were mostly red dyers. So we could compare the measurements we obtained from 6 different madder reds from the Crutchleys and 6 samples of madder reds from Languedocian dyers, including Janot and Paul Gout. And to our amazement, we discovered that for them, madder red, it was really something which was shared between dyers. You can see this similitude and closeness of the results. In terms of chroma and lightness, they completely overlap. In the case of actual shade, the Crutchley are very close, but slightly orangier than the French, the reds of the French dyers. And this is because they were allowed to use the same tin mordant as cochineal dyers, and the French dyers were not allowed to obtain them. So the use of this tin mordant explains this orangier shade of madder dyes in England, at least among the Crutchleys. And you can see here that as a whole, their reds, both the English reds and the French reds are very close to each other. You see this difference of color system. Again, Iris did all the measurements and calculations of color differences using the most accurate ones to date, the CIE 2000 delta E difference. And it's amazing to see that most of them come below the delta E1 limit, which is a limit of perception of the human eye, which is quite striking. Well, I give you examples of sample cards where we don't have color names, so that will make that will be a very new research to try and propose similitudes and comparisons between all these sample cards. And a very useful research field which has been opened by this type of approach is the comparison between indigo blues all over the world. And we started that with a very international team of master dyers who decided to compare the blues they could obtain from their different types of organic vats, either bacterial fermentation vats or reducing sugar vats, with their different sources of indigo prepared in different forms like compost or pigment. And Iris measured all the samples that were produced by all these friends and colleagues, including Abubakar Fofana. And after that, we measured the results and compared them with those we had obtained from Gout and Janot's blues. And for instance, for Janot's blues, which were the first to be submitted to this type of experiment, we found that practically all the dyers managed to reproduce the scale of blues with their own source of indigo. It required a lot of, exchanges between the team, but we can now say that any practiced dyer can reproduce these blues with their own sources of blue and their own vats. A new source of inspiration for designers and colorists. That's a big comfort, and it's a very big satisfaction for the authors of the workbooks, for Iris and myself, to know that several academic institutions like this EuroWeb in Toulouse, whose director is a next student of mine and a wonderful professor, have started reproducing and getting and working on the reproduction of the colors from these dyers from the workbooks. And this is also the case in this art college in Segovia, in Spain, where they had a whole series of experiments to reproduce Antoine Janot's blues, starting with a degree of the scales of blues and obtaining purples and greens from these browns of blues. And this is a very recent research pursued in Paula's lab, where they are working on the reproduction of Janot and Gout's yellow dyes within a larger research into the blues of the dye plants of Portugal and the south of France. And craftspeople also are getting inspired by these publications, like Dorothée in Brussels, who has given names and who is reproducing the colors of these 18th century dyers on her beautiful jewels made of silk flowers. Suzanne Dekel, also in Israel, who has written a blog on dyeing like it's 1744, reproducing Jeannot's colors. And quite recently, even the substrate of these colors has been reproduced at a small scale industrial production now of Londrin Second cloth in the south of France, very close to where Gout was working. And the dyeing is now performed in a machine, not this one, but in dye works, in industrial dye works, not far from bees either. And the yellow dye is obtained not from the boiled plant, but from wild extracts produced again also in Languedoc. So that's quite a satisfaction for the people who still live in that area to see that it's reviving. Where can you buy the book? Now from Véronique Tabuy, who has this very beautiful publishing structure, Les Mots Qui Porten. And the book had a chaotic history for its publication, and so we are very grateful to the sponsors who allowed its eventually allowed its publication. And thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, Dominique. That was a really wonderful, very inspiring presentation. I think that for us in EuroWeb in general, the whole of your research, but especially this last part that you showed us of how this research about historical dyes, historical recipes can really inspire designers, it's really something that we aim to achieve also in EuroWeb with different aspects of textile production. So it was really, really inspiring. Thank you very much. And now we have a bit of time for a Q&A. So I would like to ask anyone in the audience who would like to pose any questions about this book or any comments or any observations, please go ahead. I believe we had a comment on the chat before from Marianne, who says, hello, Dominique. I want to congratulate you for giving us your knowledge once again through this wonderful work. And my most sincere congratulations to you, Iris, Sandrine, and David. So,
oh, thank you. Thank you very much.
Anyone would like to add any further comments or make any questions? Our dye experts in the audience, maybe? Anyone? We don't have any.
You have no sound. I don't know why.
How about now?
Yes.
Take off the share screen so we can see the big picture.
Hi.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Ah,
Yeah, great. I can't hear you, Svi.
No, again.
No, I can't. No.
No, we can hear you, Svi. Sorry.
Oh, Anita.
You can hear me.
Yes, now we can.
Okay. Anyway, thank you very much, Dominique. It was a beautiful, as usual, presentation, very colorful. I always learn a lot from you. No matter how much we deal with natural dyes, we always learn from the experts, from the one who's written the Bible on dyes. Just one little tiny comment when you show the chromatogram at the very beginning of the 10 different components from the purple pigment. That's my chromatogram, not Vitold.
No, I asked Zvi. I'm sorry, but I asked Vitold, and he insisted that it was his chromatogram. So
I sent you the figure from my article in the email. Take a look at that.
yeah, but well, I'll try to find another
Okay,
figure,
we'll
but
talk later. I'll show you.
never
It's mine.
mind.
I'll show
Okay.
you the chromatogram itself. It's
Yeah.
my own.
Yes. Yes.
And I showed the publication. Okay. Anybody else
Dominique.
feeling blue?
No, it was really beautiful. It's always inspiring to be here with all of you. And I've already ordered the book, so I'll be happy to read it hopefully next week. But I also have a very, very small question that I'm wanted to ask you for so long time, and now as nobody's asking nothing, I thought, oh, I'll ask it. So Iris is measuring with the colorimeter.
Yes.
And what is she using some kind of base that she puts below the color? Because my experience when I measure color, and we have also the same data color you used, I think is so nice. But anyway, now we need to have another one. We use a kind of a base, white one, like with paper filter and some polymer, because the light passes through. So I was wondering what Iris is using for the measurements. Do you know?
No, I don't. we have I don't really understand your
so when we have the light from the data color, at least from my experience, maybe as the clothes are so maybe not so thin, it will not come out. The light goes into not only the cloth lid, but it can read below. So for example, if you are using, but maybe as she's using is it in books, if you are measuring in a blue thing, then it will see blue. If you are measuring using a black stuff, it will see black. So I mean the light,
no.
the light can go or not.
Now I understand, but it doesn't apply to our situation, because she measures each sample in the manuscript. So it's on well, first of all, woolen cloth, broad cloth is very thick.
Okay, that's maybe
that's one thing. And also all the historical samples we have measured are within a kind of file, they are within a manuscript. So we are on a pile of paper plus samples, and we cannot do otherwise. We are not allowed, and we shouldn't change the substrate. So most of the samples I've measured in the Crutchley archive or in our manuscript, they are part of a very thick a pile of paper and samples, and I don't think that the background changes very much. It's rather matte and creamy paper, but basically it's always the same type of background. So this is not a big. We didn't think it could be a problem.
Okay. Thank you.
It's a very useful thing to keep in mind. And also, Iris mostly does color measurements on woods, so that doesn't apply either, because they are very.
Wood is really thick.
Yeah. But I understand that if we go into doing the same type of research with silk samples, for instance, that's a very useful idea to keep in mind for.
Yes.
Yeah.
When we are, for example, analyzing other kind of imagine medieval manuscripts, we tend to put filter paper because it's, just to be sure that light is just going to see the same base.
Yeah, very good. Thank you.
My pleasure.
Okay, so we have a question. We have a question on the chat from Sophia, but before reading it out, I just wanted to check. Zvi, were you asking something about blues before? Do you have another?
Just giving a comment. I'm not really blue. I'm a very happy person.
Oh, okay. Good. Okay. Then Sophia asks in the chat, she mentioned that she couldn't listen from the beginning of the presentation, and she wants to ask what the material of the Paul Gout book samples were. I think they were wool, right? They were all wool?
Yes, they are a special type of wool broadcloth, which is both very dense but also thin and light, and it was specially devised for the customers of the Eastern Mediterranean. And it was called Londrin Second because it was meant to compete and eventually triumph over the English broadcloth, which itself had replaced the Venetian broadcloth. So basically along the centuries between the 17th and the end of the 18th century, the competition was towards a very thin, very fine, and very light cloth, but also very dense, high quality cloth. And this type of wool broadcloth, since it's felted, brushed, and napped, exactly, and then shorn, it functions like in a way like a silk velvet. It's the ideal substrate to give their full strength and saturation to the colors. So it's that's why I think these samples are so attractive to our modern eye.
Thank you very much. I think Anita wants to. I'm sorry, someone just started doing construction work during this presentation next door. So if you listen to a weird sound, it's just my neighbor drilling. Yes, Anita, please go ahead.
Hello, Dominique. Hello, many friends as well. I can see on screen. Dominique, fabulous as always. It's so good to see you. Thank you so much. And you know, what I always love about your work is it's so human. Like it always comes back to people, which just makes me tingle, as you know. And I'm really curious. I think it's absolutely fabulous that you're taking it back into the hands of designers and textile artists. And I know that they're recreating Jeannot and Gout, but are there surprises coming out of this creativeness? Are there, you know, are they finding that they're getting a magical new color out of something that they're trying to follow, or unexpected colors?
Not yet. Not yet. What is new is the use of colorant extracts. So they have to rebuild the whole ranges, you know, by using different machines, different type of equipment, and different, as you know, colorant extracts are not exactly and don't give the same colors as boiled plants or decoctions of plants. So it's a whole new field and it's just starting now. But for very striking applications, we are hoping that very big fashion people in France would lead the way, so to have the prestige of their brand, you know. That is why the fact that Hermès was a big sponsor of the book is quite encouraging. But up to now, there have not been any fashion show with examples of these textiles, but it may come. I hope it will.
Thank you. That's wonderful.
Thank you. Would anyone like to make any other comments, pose any other questions?
Can you hear me?
Maybe.
Zvi,
I want to go back to what Maria said before about the reflectance measurements. Can you hear me okay? There are quite a few parameters involved, which makes the color measurements based on reflectance spectrometry a bit tricky. For example, the aperture of the instrument that you use can definitely affect the final result. So when reporting the reflectance measurements, you really have to be very, very precise and explain and document as to what aperture size you use. Even the thickness, as Maria was alluding to, the thickness of the substrate, the textile, whether the light can penetrate through the textile. It's not completely opaque, so that there are problems, potential problems as far as that in reproducing the results. And also I have found, I have two such instruments. I found that depending on which instrument you use, you get slightly different results for the same substrate, for the same measurement. So the instrument has to be also documented very well, and then
Yeah.
Can try to reproduce it.
Yes. Thank you very much, Zvi, for this comment, because that's something I didn't make clear in my presentation, and I couldn't make, I couldn't reproduce the whole information which is in the workbook. One thing is that Iris mentioned all these parameters in her introduction. There's an introduction to the colorimetric part of our work at the beginning of the workbook. But further than that, I didn't mention that in the workbook too, I invite all the people who want to launch into this type of comparisons to connect with us and to contact us, because as you know, you have to calibrate. That's what you were saying in the second part of your comments. You have to calibrate your spectrophotometer. So what I did is that all the measurements which are published in the workbooks have been done with the same spectrophotometer in the same conditions. I carried it to London to do the color measurements of the Crutchley samples. And first of all, I had calibrated with the spectrophotometer, which is currently used by one of the few dye works in France who are still working for the high fashion north of Lyon. And we had a whole day of working at calibrating our instruments, so that I know when they produce color, it corresponds to the data I have on some samples. You see, that type of thing. I really encourage everybody who is wanting to share in this type of quest of colors, of lost colors, to contact us and to collaborate with us. And I'm sure we can manage to calibrate and propose common data based on these collaborations.
Yeah, if I could just comment on that as well, if that's okay, Dominique, because Zvi, the other important thing is that the Crutchley and the Jeannot and Gout books, but also they've named their colours, which is like taking it the other way around. It's actually working from colours that people have said that as a scarlet, or this is a crimson, or whatever. And that's the absolutely fascinating thing. That's a calibration in itself, that it's working from people using their visual senses to say this is a colour. And to be able to say different people are saying the same thing for the same colour, if you know what I mean. I didn't explain that very well, but I think you know what I mean.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
But you know, it existed since the medieval ages, because these few photos I showed of samples, that's how they were doing it when they didn't have spectrophotometers. They were just sending each other's samples of textile and saying, I want exactly this green, and don't send me another green. You know, there are lots of comments with these shade cards from Italian clothiers, mostly. Datini archives are very funny for that. They say, you sent me this turquoise blue. I can't sell it, you know, it's not a turquoise blue at all. I send it back. I don't want that. It's very nice. There's something I should like to is introduce you all to Véronique Tabouis, the publisher of the book, who is following us. She is in one of the photos there. Hello, Véronique, and who has been working in a fantastic way towards the publication of this book. Thank you, Véronique.
I must say I'm very proud to be able to publish Dominique. It was really a great honor. As you all said, working with Dominique is just fantastic.
Very kind, so kind. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I don't know if there are any last comments or questions. Irina, I think, wants to say something. We can't hear you, Irina, sorry. I hear you very, very far away, very faintly. No, we can. Can anyone hear Irina? Maybe it's on my side. I don't think so.
No,
we can hear you.
I can see you, Irina, but but I can't hear you. No. Can you, Francisco? Can you hear?
No, before I could hear very faintly, but maybe Irina, if you want to write on the.
She just wrote now.
Oh yeah. Just congratulations for Dominique. Yes. Thank you, Irina, and thank you for coming. Okay, so if no one else wants to add anything, I will just say again what an honor and a pleasure it was to have Dominique with us today and to hear about this wonderful new book. And thank you again for presenting it to us. And thanks to everyone who attended today and everyone who was also following, quite a few people following on YouTube too. And I hope to see you all again soon in another edition of the EuroWeb Book Corner or some other event. Thank you very much.
Bye.
Have a nice day.
Thank
Bye.
you, Dominique.
Thank you so much. Goodbye.
Goodbye.